You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. And finally, our third sponsor is 988. The Oklahoma 988 Mental Health Lifeline. 988 is a direct 3-digit lifeline that connects you with trained behavioral health professionals that can get all Oklahomans the help that they need. Learn more by visiting 988oklahoma.com. That's 988oklahoma.com. And now, let's get into today's episode. Please welcome to the podcast, Mr. Lee Roland. Lee, thanks so much for coming down today. Excited to dive into your story and the impact that you have made and the impact you continue to make. Excited to talk about the book. Shout out to Justin King for putting us together.
Absolutely.
Justin's a new friend of mine, and he's coming through with a lot of podcast connections, so I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
He also told me to talk to you about golf because you love golf, which is something I absolutely love, and it's the reason I'm in this country. So we'll do that. But before we do, tell us a little bit about you. What's kind of like your upbringing and your childhood, and where'd you grow up?
So, Mike, I grew up poor and black in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And grew up in Spencer, Oklahoma, primarily. And my dad was a pastor, so I'm the youngest of 6 boys. I have a sister 3 years younger than me, so grew up just on the other side of the street from the other kids, and so life was different for me. Growing up, we were segregated until the 6th grade, and then we were went to school with everybody. And so that's my experience here in Oklahoma. I do want to insert this into this podcast early. One of the things I grew up with, though, as I grew up PO, that's minus an O and minus an R in Oklahoma. I was privileged, and I have no problem sharing my privilege, which was a mom and dad that were both, though albeit poor and PO, they both had college degrees. Mm-hmm. And so I was privileged around my peers that I was growing up with. Many of them grew up without a father in the home or the stability that I had in my home. So I was privileged, and I have no problem enjoying my privilege. And I don't think anyone should feel guilty for having privilege. The only problem is when we feel like we were kind of better than others, and we just don't want to recognize that. So that's the abbreviated version of who I am. Life was tough, though, looking kind of through that lens of black and poverty and impoverished in Oklahoma, looking at what was going on with the civil rights. I was a kid. I was too young to know what was going on, but just aware enough to be afraid. And so I still have that fear kind of in my dreams, in my mind, that of what I grew up with, and now seeing some of the same issues we're still struggling as a society to be unified and whatnot. So that's the abbreviated version.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got time, so I want to dive into this stuff. The one thing that, like you said, you grew up with mom and dad that were college grads. Mm-hmm. So you had an example from early on that mom and dad, valued school education, and that being the youngest of 6 boys, did you see your older brothers kind of do that, go to school and kind of say you had something to follow after as well?
Yeah, so my oldest brother was kind of the guy I'm following after. He was went to the Air Force. Two of my brothers went to Vietnam, and but faith and education was a priority in our home, and so I did have those guys to imitate, to emulate. My oldest brother graduated with electronic technology, and that's what I started out in pursuit of. So I did have the privilege of watching others make mistakes, but watching others kind of pave a way for me and whatnot. And so I'm super, super, super grateful. And I'll try not to use that word again, but I'm super grateful for the privilege of growing up in a very healthy family of love and nurturing. And I did not know that my life was the exception, Mike, until I got older. And in fact, I graduated with four of the guys that we were super close. We called ourselves the Sophisticated Gents from Star Spencer High School. And it wasn't until we were all 40 and we met for dinner one evening. And those guys told me for the first time, all of them had more than I had. In terms of economic advantage, if you would, in their home. And it was crazy how this conversation with these five black guys get around to this point. But these guys told me that every one of them were jealous and or envious of me. I said, what? And we never had that conversation. We talk about girls, cars, tell all our lies about who was best in sports and all that. And this conversation swung around to these guys saying, we were all jealous of you. And it really helped me to just kind of look at the way many of our children are growing up in our schools without some of those things. And one of my passions is to try to make sure that those resources that I took for granted then are made available and accessible to children and for the broader society out there that don't realize how difficult it is for many of our children and our families. We're telling people to pull themselves up by a bootstrap, and there are no boots, there are no straps. And so unless some of us reach out and give them a hand, they're not going to overcome these formidable odds.
So growing up then, going into school, going into high school and having those moments, and then you go on to, I assume, go on to university?
Yes.
Did you stay local to go to university?
I did. I share some of my story in my book, The Fantastic Voyage, but left Star Spencer High School, Spencer, Oklahoma City Public Schools, go to Stillwater in 1977 at 17 years old, and my eyes were awakened to how crude the world can be. It was very, 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 I don't know if I said it or not, it was very, very divided. In 1977, I don't know how much inroads we made on this division now, but it was very, very divided then. And so my experience as a 17-year-old black student at Oklahoma State University was a negative one. And myself and many of my peers, we left after our freshman years. I mean, a lot of us did, because we could not handle the lack of diversity at the university and the issues that were. So, yes, I did. I went to Oklahoma State University as a freshman. Ended up getting my undergrad at University of Central Oklahoma, and then grad school at University of Oklahoma. So
during this time, then you're obviously going to school and education is kind of your passion. You're kind of. Are you going to school? Do you know what you want to be when you're doing this? Are you in teaching, or are you like some students that just, no, I'm going to get a piece of paper and I'm going to figure it out? Like, are you at a plan set and a degree that you think I'm going to do this and then I'm going to go on, or is it something different? Yeah,
so my plan was to follow my brother's footstep. He was very, very successful, graduated in electronic technology, got a job with one of the oil companies, and he was making good money, and that's the route that I thought I wanted to follow. And I'll never forget, I share a story in my book. My freshman year, I was in an electronic course at Oklahoma State, and I dozed off in class. I was the only black student in there, and my professor threw an eraser and hit me in the face, and so I've got this white chalk from this eraser on my face, and all my classmates were laughing, and that was kind of my baptism into, wow, everything is not the way I thought it would be. I left a very, very integrated high school, and we had kind of solved a lot of those issues, but my course to education was, my journey to education is that electronic world, and in that experience really kind of said, hey, I don't know if I even want this kind of environment. So I go into education thinking that I just wanted to be a football coach, basketball coach, and teach kids and whatnot. And I was really kind of called into leadership. My principals said, hey, you need to be a principal. And I was just a young kid, like, why? And I'm asking myself, but they looked at a skill set that I had to work with children, work with parents, and work with teachers and stuff. So I was mediating things as a first-year teacher. I was like, hey, can I help you with this situation and whatnot? And I was pushed over into administration and ended up, after 4 years of teaching, then spending 25 years in administration as a principal and a central office worker trying to help teachers and parents and whatnot. So this is my...
Yeah.
I didn't know that's what I wanted to do, but once I kind of fell there, I realized this is where I'm supposed to be. And that old adage, if you find out what you love, you'll never work. Mm-hmm. And it was something I loved, and teaching kids, working with teachers and families, serving people, it's my passion. I love it.
Yeah. So where does that, the one thing that kind of stands out for me is like, and there's a lot of, kids growing up these days, like I said, they don't really know what they want to do, right? But, I found it in doing this podcast. You clearly found it, as you just explained. But we go through life and we find, these passions just seem to, the lucky one of us, I guess, seem to just show itself, right? And we're fortunate enough that we have those experiences and we fall into a spot that we're like, wow, like I love what I do now and I'm going to devote everything I have to this, like you just mentioned. But where does the leadership, you mentioned coaching, obviously growing up, and you said you're a bit of an athlete as well. Where does that example for you come from with the leadership stuff and the coaching and that? It seems like you're very natural at it.
So I'm glad you asked. That's a great question. My dad was a pastor, and so I'm watching and living, have a front row seat to leadership. And so my mom was a teacher, but she didn't teach. She taught because of the size of our family. It just wasn't profitable. So I've got a front row seat watching Dad lead and seeing him serve people. And so I was kind of grafted into this role, just a branch from that tree. And again, it's back to that privilege of seeing something and having a possible vision and a path for yourself. And so I said I wasn't going to mention this word privilege anymore, but many of our students in our school, especially our black and brown children, don't have the privilege I had of even seeing what your future could look like. And so as a principal, Mike, one of the things that I did is try to get our teachers, low-income black students that were, the school was failing when we got there. One of the things I got ushered into a part of our curriculum, if you would, or of our instruction is really showing the kids the many potential things that they could do with their talents and with their dreams and with their gifts. And so one of the mistakes we've made in school is particularly in the communities that I grew up in, which were devoid of a lot of role models and examples and things like that. One of the things that they were guilty of was telling kids, go to school and get a good education. Get a good education. That is an extremely nebulous term to children of poverty who, when you say a good education, I don't know what you're talking about. A fourth or fifth grader thinks, well, I can add and subtract. I can read a little bit, and so they think I have an education. No, you don't. You don't have a clue of what the level of comprehension that you'll need to have, the vocabulary that you'll need to have, the math skills. And so what I was trying to get my teachers to do, and they did quite well, better than I could have even asked, is really to show kids how what you're doing will relate to a greater world out there. So whether or not it's construction, whether or not it's mechanics, law, engineering, whatever it is. And we try to show children really the path that you can take. So I encourage my teachers, K-Joe, my teachers, show your children a picture of your home. Show your children a picture of your vacation so that they could dream. They had no clue that this world is much bigger than it is. I didn't know. I found out through kind of vicariously looking at some of the things that my dad did and things like that, but trying to open the world up to our children and to our parents was part of our journey, but I know we're not there yet.
Yeah, and to that point, do you know Tito?
I know him well. We live in the same neighborhood.
Great.
Yeah.
So I listened to Tito's TEDx talk.
It's amazing.
And then moments, and standing ovation. I got chills thinking about it, and it's exactly to that point, right?
Absolutely.
It's those moments that we take for granted, and he did a great job explaining it. That he got a job because his college roommate's neighbor was the head of HR. And it's these and then moments,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And like he explained, and like what you just explained, growing up, you were fortunate because you had those experiences, but most of the kids don't,
exactly.
right? And like you said, when you say pull your boots up by your bootstraps or just go get a great education, well, it starts way before that.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's the part that we have to change, right?
Absolutely.
And the stuff that seems like you've been doing for a long time is trying to get teachers to say, look, well, yeah, but there's 10 steps before that to get you to that.
Exactly.
And how do we open that up?
Exactly.
And, it seems like you spent a long time just unlocking that for kids who didn't grow up like you, who grew up with absentee dads or, in poverty or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, my journey and my experience as an educator was fun. It was just a natural life sharing of life's experiences. So as I'm talking to kids, I'm grabbing them by their collars and showing them, hey, listen here, dude, listen here. Here's what your future can be like. And so just kind of as Tito talked about those and then moments, one of the things that I was trying to get kids to understand, listen here. You're fighting at school, you're being rebellious, you're doing all of these things. Listen, you cannot go to Bob Moore Cadillac, you cannot go over here with somebody and hold up your fist and say, give me a home. Give me a car. That's not how it works. You're going to need to have a job. You're going to need to have credit. That's how I got my car. That's how I got my home. So I told my students my story, and they would sit there with their mouths agape, just like, Oh, really? Because I'm telling them a story. Everybody likes a story. And then when they could identify themselves in my story, how did you get to where you got? Well, I sat down and I listened to my teacher and I dreamed, and then I realized that, listen here, there may be something to this thing called school. It is the great equalizer. So I had fun, Mike. I had fun preaching and just demanding the best out of my kids, because failure was not an option to me, and I wanted them to know, again, vicariously through my story, that my journey, in fact, I have a presentation saying I am you. And I've done this at universities, I've done this at high school, variations of this, I am you. I grew up without this, I didn't have this, I didn't have this, I didn't have this. Look at me, kid, look at me, kid, look at me. I am you 50 years later, 60 years later, if you will do these things. Just walk in the steps that I took. And I know it's not easy. I know you might need someone to help you there, but these kids have listened, and I'm telling you, it's a great feeling right now to be a retired principal and see many of these kids now doing well in their life. But I know we're not there yet. We'll talk more about the journey.
Yeah. So to that point then, with the journey, then you kind of go into administration, and you, like I said, you find your passion, and someone gives you opportunity, and then like you kind of fall into this role and figure it out. The one thing that stands out when most people look at you and look at what you've done is obviously the transformation of 2 Lakes.
Yes, sir.
So I'd love for you to share, as much as you want to share about, what it was like when you started to what it's like when you left, because that's a massive impact.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing my story, variation of this story rather, with a group of business leaders, because it does transfer over to any form of leadership, whether or not you're a coach, you're a pastor, you're a business leader, you're a business person, you have subordinates. It works anywhere, but the short version is I was recruited to the school district to serve, and I thought they were just kind of randomly just wanted to increase the diversity in their district, and that wasn't quite the story. I think they did want to have diversity. There were no other black principals in the district and whatnot, but the assignment that I was given wasn't random. It was a school that really had been experienced significant failure ever since the 80s, and kind of the district started to experience the flight of those that could fly away. And that's all I'll say about it. But so the district started to experience flight. A bunch of Section 8 apartments that had once been affluent dwellings became duplexes and apartments, Section 8. And I like to share that many of those those dwellings had been so unkept, if you would, that they should have actually been leveled. They should have been raised. But that's where all of these students were coming from. And so they're coming from 3, 4, 5-story apartments where on the ground level, on the apartments, on the streets, in the parking lot, it just wasn't safe. When kids got home from school, get inside and stay there until the next day to leave school. It was a really, really horrible place for those kids to really grow up in an environment. The school had the highest suspensions in the district, 100 plus a year, the highest number of retentions, students being held back. It was kind of a Siberia in many ways for teachers. If you go to teach at that school, then it's kind of the graveyard. Parents didn't want their kids there. The kids didn't want to be there. It was I don't want to offend anybody, but it was really the armpit of the district. It really was. And my first day there, I like to share, I couldn't believe it. When I saw the children as they walked in, their clothing, their dress, their behaviors, I could not believe it. So the long story short, we turned the school completely around. and we ended up with the fewest suspensions in the district. I'm kind of proud of it. We had one suspension my last 2 years there at the school. You won't see that in a private school. We enjoyed a lot of success with student management issues. Our test scores were among the highest in the district. We did get some recognition, state recognition, and some gifts for our achievement. Our staff went from a place where teachers didn't want to be to a place where teachers absolutely, unequivocally wanted to be there. They were basically on a waiting list. They were waiting for vacancies to come open at our school from other schools, more affluent schools to come to our school. And so we were doing some things well and doing some things right. One of my greatest celebrations, if you would, I'm not proud, I'm thankful that we were able to create that kind of environment. Our teachers who resided in much more affluent areas and whom did not look like the children that they served brought their children, their biological children, to our school. And so we've got teachers that lived in Edmond, Deer Creek, Piedmont, Yukon, Mustang, brought their children to this low socioeconomic community to be educated. And it was a very, very, I don't know, just a moment of great gratitude to see that things had been turned around like that. And so, Mike, we can talk about some of the particulars of that, but having experienced that and been a leader in that transformation, now I'm not okay with that kind of systemic failure happening anywhere. It is very, 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 very common thing where we have black and brown children of poverty that we have failure. And that's basically, you just go and point out that community, and we have struggling schools as a rule. There are exceptions. We were one, but it's not okay with me now that we have any like that.
Yeah.
It can be turned around when people actually do the right thing for our kids and for their parents.
Yeah. So that first day, then, you're seeing kids walk in. What in you says, I can turn this around? What in you says, this is a challenge, I'm going to take it on, and I'm going to make this place what it is and what it is today, and, now in a place where, you guys had recognition from the state for the school?
So one thing was my faith, and my faith says you get down on your knees, you pray about it, and your God is able to do abundantly more than you can ever ask. Practically speaking, if someone doesn't subscribe to that, I'm an athlete. I'm a competitor, and so I don't play to lose. I don't play to participate. I play to win. And so that was the second part, was that, hey, let's get after it. The third thing was that, to me, this was my job. And I was paid, I was employed to perform a job, to do a role. And Mike, I would frequently get a new assistant principal to train and to try to just kind of mentor and things like that. And so one of my first conversations with my new assistant principal every year would be, listen, they don't pay us to wish. They don't pay us to hope. They pay us to do a job. So whether or not I'm going to be playing baseball or basketball or you name it, we're going to give our effort. And all of my life, basically, when people work hard, you'll see results. Now, we want to. I would tell my staff even that I have no doubt that our best is good enough. no doubt. But anything less of that, we may fail. And so those would be the three things that I told myself that would help us make the grade, be successful, is my faith, competing, working hard, saying, hey, if that school over there is being successful, there's nothing wrong with my kids. My kids are not some leftovers, so I'm going to take my team and we can compete against yours, we can win. And then the last thing was work hard, and working hard, I believe, is working less than hard in a role like this is really next to criminal.
Yeah. So kind of what I take away from that is obviously your love of sports, and it seems like you harness the passion, the dedication, the hard work that a child will put into a sport because they love the sport, and you harness that and you just direct it at, hey, look, I know you love sport, this is incredible, your hard work. It's also pretty quantifiable, because did we win on the weekend or did we not, and why and then you break it down. The skill is transitioning that love and passion for sport and winning to education.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I love the word you use, harness. I don't believe that any leader, a pastor, a CEO, a coach, I don't believe any leader can be effective without passion. And so I was and am an extremely passionate leader. And I'm telling teachers, and Mike, I'll tell you one story real quick to digress. I had a group of kids when I was a teacher. They were in summer school. If they failed summer school, these fifth graders were going to have to repeat the fifth grade. And these kids were brought from neighboring schools, and these kids are kind of slumped over in their seats. And they're kind of slumped over in their seats at day one. And I'm like, oh, no, this is not going to work. And so, Mike, I jumped up on the desk to tell the kids, you're here to learn, and I'm here to teach you, and failure is not an option. So y'all better get ready, because we're going to rock and roll all summer. Every one of you are going to pass this test, and then clink, clink. Mike, I get hit by the ceiling fan just above my eye. My eye bled like a cow. I mean, those little girls in there, they thought I was a pretty cool teacher, and they were like, oh no, I'm teacher, and whatnot. But that passion I started out with, I kept it my entire life. It was not unusual for me to go in the cafeteria and just preach to kids. It was not unusual for me to go in the staff meeting and just preach to teachers. Do you know you're the best teachers in the world? You are amazing. We can do this. We must do this. And I did that with passion. I don't know how. I guess somebody could do it I guess it could be done, but I can't imagine winning without passion. I've seen coaches on the sideline, and they're just kind of lackadaisical, and I hadn't seen too many people win like that. Speaking of coaches, I strongly encourage my teachers to do some of the behaviors that we see coaches do, and that is, you get out and you tell your kids, you can win, you can do this, I believe in you. And I've told teachers, I believe it's in the Bible somewhere, it's all right to lie if you're going to tell somebody something good. Okay, if you tell Mike, hey, Mike, listen here, you're an amazing kid. Maybe you don't believe it, but see, what I know is Mike believes what you believe. And so if you tell Mike that Mike is a handsome kid, he's a wonderful kid, Mike will start to live that out. And we were doing that sort of thing with kids, and I'm telling you, it was a game changer. The end result was a beautiful, beautiful kid that really just outperformed what he ever thought he could ever do, or she thought she could do.
Yeah. And you see that transformation, you see the smile on their faces, they're bouncing, coming into school. That's a huge change from that first day where you saw them walking in, right?
Mike, I miss that. I miss that, and there's a void in my life where I'll forever be, because just seeing kids come in from acting like a zero to leaving like a hero. It's something that a lot of people that outside of education won't get to experience, but people that are in education, man, I'm telling you, it is heartwarming. I'll share this with you. Many of my teachers that did not grow up like our children grew up in terms of poverty and children of color and things like that. I think our teachers came into our school, into their classroom, kind of a lackadaisical attitude in approaching the children. It was kind of like, okay, this was a job, and I'll just do my job. And they left there in love. The next thing you know, they're in love, because what happened was, as they helped kids be successful, the feeling that they got. I'd like to share a story real quick. One of my teachers, her father was a very successful gentleman, very, very successful gentleman. And he just sat down with me and visited. And he said, Mr. Roland, I'm extremely, I'm very envious of my daughter. I said, really? Why? He says, she loves what she does. She loves what she does. And what she loved about it was being loved by her kids. She gave them some love, but they gave her back twofold. And the worth that she had and the feeling of value that she had was, you can't put a price tag on it. And I can't put a price tag on just that wonderful feeling of just kind of making a difference, just being loved. Another story, I went to a basketball game of our school one day, and our kids, after the game, all the kids ran up to me, hey, Mr. Roland, hey, they gave me 5 and hugs and all that kind of stuff. And one of the few dads walked up to me and he said, man, do you realize how lucky you are to have this many people just love you? Do you realize the wealth of the value of that? And I tried to downplay it. No, I don't. Shoot, I did, man. It was a wonderful feeling like you make a difference. And for people that do work where it's just kind of a job and you get paid, I wish teachers made more money, but I'm very, very grateful for really what they really receive in the form of love and appreciation from most of their students, and the vast number of their parents know the value of these people. I wish the rest of society did.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a chat with Debrion Davis.
Sure, okay.
And asked her, we had a quick chat during the TEDx thing, and asked her, you know, what does she love, what does she miss about, you know, because she's obviously gone into a more leadership role now. And she said that I think what she said was she just loves standing in the hallway during, like, in between class time, just seeing kids run around, going from class to class. Just that buzz and just that energy, and then in a flash it's gone because they're in class and it's quiet again. Yeah. But that just stood out.
It's nothing like being in those places with those young people who I love and I believe God loves, because they, as a rule, they look at one another without judgment. They accept everybody. They don't really learn some of this foolishness of bigotry and things like that until they get away from school. I don't know if there's a great place to insert this, but Mike, I'd love to share this point about teachers and educators. I'm in a constant state of frustration when I look at how teachers are undervalued and underappreciated in America. And I just knew, and I shared it in a commentary I wrote for the Daily Oklahoman, but I'm quite frustrated that we look at first responders and share with them a lot of love. We should. Oh my goodness, I'm so appreciative of them. I'm very, very appreciative of how we honor our military and whatnot. I'm very appreciative of that. But I believe that teachers ought to be in the same conversation. I have this conversation almost daily. People do not know where America would be without educators in general, and particularly public school educators. We would have mass chaos on our hands if it wasn't for those people who selflessly give of their time. And I just knew after the pandemic thing kind of died down and whatnot, I just knew that as America returned to work, teachers would be appreciated, administrators, schools would be appreciated and loved on. I just knew it without a shadow of a doubt. And I see us kind of going right back to our own ways of really kind of neglecting these professionals. I'm telling you, I will always be beholden to the teachers that I knew that served with me because they gave of themselves selflessly and changed children's lives for the better. And I guarantee you the children that came into contact with Lee Roland and his staff at Two Lakes, those children know right from wrong, and the vast majority of them are making good choices, pursuing great dreams because they were loved on and served in a way that that they can now see value in themselves. And America is full of people who are doing hopeless things because they are relatively hopeless. What the research shows is that without a primary caregiver that provides, with the exception of that person, not having another person in your life besides your primary caregiver, many of our children are making poor choices, suicide and other stupid things. And our teachers were standing in the gap for many of our children, but not only them, with many of the parents of our children.
Yeah. I mean, for all of us, we look at that. We look back at our school, right? Or we look back at those experiences, whether it was at church, we had a volunteer or, a Sunday school teacher or an actual teacher at school. We all generally have that one memory that comes back to us, that when that teacher believed in us and gave us that affirmation, gave us that, and like you just said earlier, it doesn't matter if they were lying to us because it works. It gives you that, I'm important. I can do this. Like, because they're probably not getting it from home, right? And even if they are, it doesn't hurt to continue to have that reinforcement.
Absolutely.
I'm sure the data says it's not going to harm you if you keep telling your kid, hey, you can do this. So we all had that experience, and it's just reinforcing that. And even though you might have some teachers who are generally introverted, it works, right? Doesn't matter how it comes across.
It doesn't. I had an exercise I did with every teacher. They come in, they sit across from me, and I told them, share with me what passion looks like for you. I had an exercise. I've got some teachers that are rather introverted. They're rather quiet, demure, resigned, or whatever. But I need to see, if I'm a learner in your classroom, what does passion look like? And every one of them were able to articulate, this is how my passion looks. And they knew that they're doing this activity with me, and I want to see that in a classroom, because as a learner, that is transferable and whatnot. So absolutely, unequivocally, bro, that it does work when somebody else says that I believe in you and I'm here to support you on a journey. it absolutely works.
Yeah. So you go through this time at Two Lakes, you transform, you and you build a team and everyone does great and the kids are doing fantastic. And you get to a point where, I assume you retire and you think, I should write a book. How does that come about? And then we can dive into what the book is and then how people can learn from it.
Sure. I'm a speaker. I do motivational speaking, I do coaching, I do consulting, training. That was the last thing on my mind for writing a book. How the book came about is people visited the school and said, you need to write a book. One group came from around the country. They were in Oklahoma to view schools and healthcare and law enforcement, and a group came to our school and they said, this is amazing. And that's all they did, is just toured our school, and they said, this is amazing. One of the ladies in the group of 12 to 15, she said that this is what school must look like in heaven. And she was in tears when she shared it, and I was like, oh my goodness, maybe I should write a book. I don't know how to write a book. Not long afterwards, another group was visiting the school, and the lady says she happens to be an editor and a book publisher. And she said, you should write a book. I said, oh, yeah, sure. And I had no intentions of writing a book because I don't know how to write a book. I saw her about 2 or 3 times afterwards at various meetings, and she said, have you started writing a book yet? I said, no. And she said, this is all you have to do, is just tell your story. And I just told my story in the book from my humble beginnings as a poor black kid in Oklahoma, seeing disturbing things, experiencing disturbing things, seeing teachers give up on kids, schools give up on kids, to saying, nope, not under my watch. That's not going to happen. And so that's what prompted me to write our story. And I think anybody and everybody could see themselves in our story. Wherever you are on the continuum of economics, wherever you are on the continuum of inclusion or exclusion, you could see yourself in our story and saying, this probably should convict me to do better, convict me to think differently, and ultimately act differently when I think about the whole thing of loving my neighbor, the whole thing of education and how education, the importance of it all. I go in pretty hard and challenge people in my story and hope that they will again see themselves and do better. I'm hoping that if we know better, we'll do better.
Yeah. So the book is just another branch to impact people, right? Of your story, also through the speaking, and it's if people can't see you live or they can't watch you, they can buy the book and learn your story as well.
Yeah.
What I'm curious is do you feel now, with everything you do now, do you feel like you make more of an impact doing what you do now, or more of an impact when you were changing lives at the school?
It's a great question. My release from the school, my teachers were incredibly loyal, and my parents were, my students were. I mean, we had a relationship. And so my release from the school after being there 12 years was, hey, if it can happen here, it can happen other places. And so I was replaced by a principal who's hardworking, sharp, determined. I left her in the best shape that I could possibly leave her, with the promise that I'm always there to support and encourage her. And so I was making an impact there. I'm hoping and praying that I'm making a greater impact as I go across the state and really across the country and talk to audiences of myriads of profession, but particularly educators, and telling them, if we did it, you can do it. And so failure is not an option. I believe that, Mike, I believe that what we did, the way we went about doing our work, you can drop us off, me and my staff off, you can drop us off in the Bronx, you can drop us off in the barrio, you can drop us off at LA, Compton, and I believe we could turn a school around. I'll share this with you. 2 gentlemen speaking at an international conference, and 2 gentlemen from Iceland. They didn't look like me. They didn't look like me.
Yeah.
Those gentlemen said, you need to come to Iceland to speak. And I said, really? And so these problems, these challenges of serving our children well, failure is not an option. These challenges are ubiquitous. Every country has them, every state has them, and the story can be different. And I'll take it a step further. The story should be different. When we lead well, people will follow well. When we empower people, I'm convinced. Mike, let me tell you one of the dirtiest things I ever did. I didn't really mean it to be dirty, but it turned out that way. One year, I'm doing teacher evaluations, and I give every teacher the evaluation, and I say, evaluate yourself. And they did their evaluation, and every one of them were harder on themselves than I would have been. And I didn't realize until after I'd done that exercise how invaluable that was. This was one thing. They want to do their best, and we had conversations about that, and it was a wonderful thing to actually mark them higher and say, no, you're better than that, and then saw them even work harder to meet my expectations, but not meet my expectations, really to serve their students and their families. And so, Mike, our story of success was addressing things like how we respond, how America responds to people of poverty. That was a key part to our success. We had to get teachers to relook at how we actually sometimes unknowingly look at people that don't look like us, don't have the experience like that we have, and we really kind of look down our noses at these people. And so some of our training was my training and conversations with my teachers, I guarantee you, were they weren't the norm. And there are conversations that we should be having at every school, in every church, at every business. How are we responding? How do the people on the other side of us view us? We think we're being kind. We think we're being fair. But as my teachers, as I encouraged them, and some of them really didn't even need it, they just needed to be given the freedom to really look at how they're being received by their students, by their parents. Once we started to do that, I'm telling you, bro, it was transformative. We had conversations about race. We had conversations about poverty. We had conversations about training about immigration and immigrants and whatnot. It changed the game. People came in with a fixed mindset once they became more open-minded and really tried to look at how, again, they were being received. It was game-changing.
Yeah, and like you said, you take that, that thing that you've built and that model that you've built, and it can go anywhere around the world.
Absolutely.
Right? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't
where
matter.
you are, what race you are. The model works.
Exactly.
And that is, that's the greatest part of it, is because it travels, and then you can pass this on to anyone else who wants to implement this.
Yes, sir.
And then your legacy and impact lives on long after you do and everybody else, right?
That's the plan. Yes, sir.
That's the good thing,
how it
right?
works.
That
Yes,
is
sir.
like, when you come to that final resting moment, and you're like, it's my time, going up to the pearly gates, my life has ended, I've made an impact.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what it comes back to.
Absolutely.
And I get the passion in your voice. I mean, just for an hour of you speaking, it just comes out, and it's, I get the sense you're not done at all. Like you keep saying it, we're not there yet, and even if we don't get there in your lifetime, we will still be on that journey and still be working towards it because of the thing that you have put together and the team that you've built.
Yeah, one of my good friends, Waylon Cubitt, shared something. He said, we may start a spark. We may spark a fire that we never get to be warmed by. And if that's God's will, then that's fine. I want to spark a fire. And Mike, I have this conversation of this nature with somebody literally every day. Yeah. Sometimes it's a neighbor walking in my neighborhood. It is legislators. It is pastors. I have this conversation every day. I'm trying to start a wildfire of love, of change in America. Many of us have heard people say, I want to leave it better than I found it. How many of us can say this? In my lifetime, things have never been great in America. I take a little issue. I'm not trying to be political here, people, please. I'm not trying to be political here, but I take a little issue with the MAGA campaign, Make America Great Again, because I don't really know quite what you mean because it's never been great for some people. So let's make it great. It can just be Make America Great, and I'll get on that bandwagon. But when I was, all of my life, America has been a great country. It's been a great country. But if we want to make it better than we found it, we're going to have some tough conversations about how we treat people, how some people have been marginalized and underserved in this country. And I get it, Mike. All of us want to say, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest? None of us want to look in the mirror and feel like I'm not a good person or anything. But we need to stand in that mirror a little bit longer and let that mirror really talk back to us. Oklahoma, we can do better. We can do much better. Yes, we're a great place, but we could be much better. I can't wait to talk to one of our photojournalists here in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma is well familiar with him. Is this a great state or what? And I just want to talk to him. Hey, bro, it's a great state. It's a great state when it's a great place for everybody. And I'd like to see us working collaboratively to try to make this a great state for all people.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to end it. Lee, I can't thank you enough for coming in, sharing your story. I know we could talk for hours.
We could.
I think me, you, and Justin need to sit down and record a separate golf podcast, because I think there's a lot of ties in that as well. So we'll definitely do that. For people listening, I can, whenever we'll put that out on our golf podcast that me and Justin are going to kick back off soon. But for people listening, I will put in the description all of Lee's information, how you can get the book, his website, leeroland.education, and all the other good ways to reach out to him if you feel called, led to just reach out. You have an experience you want to share. I believe your cell number is on the website, right?
It is.
So you can reach out there. And thank you so much for coming in. It's an absolute pleasure to listen and to just hear your passion and listen, to meet you and see the impact that you've made. It means a lot. So thank you for giving up your time for our listeners, and for people listening. We'll catch you next episode. Cheers. Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And finally, our third sponsor for today, the Oklahoma 988 Mental Health Lifeline. 988 is the direct 3-digit lifeline that connects you with the trained behavioral health professionals that can get all Oklahomans the help that they need. Learn more by visiting 988oklahoma.com. It's 988oklahoma.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.